In the 1930s, the federal government warned bankers, mortgage lenders, and business owners about neighborhoods in cities across the country, including San Antonio's inner east, west, and south sides. These parts of the city were labeled by the now defunct Homeowners Loan Corporation as definitely declining or hazardous. It's a practice that today is called redlining, and it meant that people living in those neighborhoods, mostly Black and Latino residents, didn't have access to regular home loans. And for those wanting a change of circumstances, it wasn't as simple as moving to the next zip code. Many San Antonio neighborhoods that developed outside the inner city were deed restricted, prohibiting people of color from moving into them.
People got trapped as a result of it through schools, through location of resources, through allocation of resources. They were forced to work through loan sharks. They were paying extraordinarily high rates.
Redlining intensified racial segregation and poverty in San Antonio.
And that has a psychological effect. That investment did not come to those communities very easily. And so if you're having to travel to get to stores and groceries and places like that, that's going to have an effect on your health.
Redlining created a cycle that generations of San Antonio families have had a difficult time getting out of. To this day, median incomes in the west, south, and right here on the east side are much lower than the north side or areas outside Loop 410. And it's not just financial. Many health issues like diabetes run rampant in these areas.
And it was an eye-opener for me when I saw a map of redline San Antonio in the 1930s. And correlate it to today's diabetic amputation rates. And it was when it became an eye-opening for me that when racism and segregation was intended back in the early 1900s, that it still had an effect today.
Saying that race is a public health crisis, that should not be a controversial issue. And I encourage those people who are uncomfortable with that, that it's not just race. You know, race is one of those issues, but class is an issue as well.
The practice of redlining ended in the late 1960s, but it left psychological, emotional, and financial scars. It's part of the reason why San Antonio is still one of the most economically segregated cities in the U.S. Many people lost out on decades of generational wealth and well-being that could have made an impact today.
You can't just have a law passed today and change 50 to 60 to 70 years of racism or class biases. So I think that's how San Antonio has gotten here. Each generation adds to the next. And so if we don't find a way to address it psychologically, emotionally, citywide, we're not going to really make any kind of change that's really productive.
When we hear racism today, we think, are we racist today or are we not? And the bigger picture is that we all can admit that racist activities happened in our past. And it's acknowledging is that racist activities have put policies and lack of infrastructure in communities down a path where we see these health inequities. And it's acknowledging that that racist history and activities back then influence and affect us today.